The morning sunlight filtered through rainbow-colored paper cutouts taped to classroom windows, casting gentle patterns across tiny desks arranged in perfect circles. In the center of room 12 at Riverside Elementary School stood Diana Holloway, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers, reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to 23 five-year-olds who hung on her every word. Her voice was soft, patient, exactly what you'd expect from someone who dedicated 15 years to shaping young minds. But what the Navy SEALs would discover later that morning would shatter everything anyone thought they knew about the woman they called Miss Diana. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Diana closed the book with a gentle smile, watching as little hands shot up across the reading circle. "Miss Diana, can we see the real caterpillars now?" asked Emma, a bright-eyed girl with pigtails who always sat closest to the teacher's chair. Diana's laugh was warm, genuine, the kind that had made her the most beloved teacher at Riverside Elementary for over a decade. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's check on our chrysalises." She moved with a grace that seemed natural for someone who spent her days navigating between tiny chairs and scattered crayons, but there was something else in her movements, a precision that went unnoticed by children but would have been unmistakable to anyone trained to recognize it. The way she swept her eyes across the room wasn't just checking on students, it was a tactical assessment. The way she positioned herself always kept her back to a wall and her view of both the door and windows clear. The way her hand instinctively moved to her hip when the morning announcement crackled over the intercom. These were habits that 15 years of kindergarten hadn't quite erased. The butterfly garden sat on the windowsill, a carefully maintained ecosystem that Diana had built from scratch. As the children gathered around, pressing their small faces against the glass, she pointed out the changes in each chrysalis with the kind of detailed observation that made her an exceptional teacher. What her colleagues didn't know was that this same attention to detail had once made her one of the most effective operatives in Unit Blackwater, a classified military division that didn't exist on any official record. "Look, Miss Diana, this one's moving," squealed Marcus, a boy who reminded Diana of someone she once knew, someone's real name she'd promised never to speak aloud. "That means it's almost ready to emerge," Diana explained, her voice steady, despite the memory that flickered behind her eyes. "Sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen in the darkness, where no one can see." She didn't realize how prophetic those words would prove to be. The morning routine continued as it had for 15 years. Snack time at 9:30, where Diana distributed apple slices and graham crackers with the same methodical efficiency she once used to distribute ammunition and tactical gear. Story time at 10:15, where her ability to hold a room's attention, a skill honed during classified briefings, kept even the most restless 5-year-old captivated. Art time at 11 o'clock, where her steady hands guided tiny fingers in cutting and pasting. The same hands that had once assembled explosive devices in complete darkness. But Diana's past wasn't just a collection of skills that translated surprisingly well to early childhood education. It was a weight she carried in the space between her shoulder blades, a constant awareness that made her check the locks on her apartment door 3 times each night and sleep with a loaded Glock 19 in a biometric safe beside her bed. It was the reason she'd chosen Millbrook, Vermont, a town so small and peaceful that the biggest crime in the past 5 years had been teenagers spray painting the water tower. That operation had cost her everything. Her team, her identity, her ability to trust anyone outside of herself. It had also saved 37 American hostages and prevented a terrorist attack that would have killed hundreds. The government had given her a medal she couldn't tell anyone about, and a new identity she'd used to disappear completely. Diana Holloway, former Black Ops operative with a kill count that would have shocked her kindergarten colleagues, had died in that compound. What emerged was a woman who just wanted to teach children about butterflies and kindness. But as Diana would learn in exactly 17 minutes, Some transformations aren't permanent. Some chrysalises can be broken open from the outside. At 11:43 a.m., while her students were engrossed in finger painting, Diana heard the distinctive sound of tactical boots on linoleum, a sound she hadn't heard in 8 years, but recognized instantly. Her hand moved instinctively toward her hip, finding only the fabric of her floral print dress. Her breathing remained steady, her expression unchanged, but every muscle in her body went into a state of controlled readiness that her students would never notice, but that would have been unmistakable to anyone who'd ever served in combat. The footsteps stopped outside her classroom door. "Children," Diana said, her voice maintaining the same gentle tone she'd used all morning, "let's clean up our painting stations very quietly. We're going to play the silent game." 23 5-year-olds immediately focused on putting away their supplies, delighted by the unexpected game. Diana moved to the window, ostensibly to check on the butterfly garden, but actually to assess potential exit routes and sightlines. The playground was clear, but she could see 2 black SUVs parked on the street, vehicles that definitely hadn't been there during recess. A knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps, followed by 2 softer ones. Diana's blood went cold. It was a pattern she recognized, one that brought back memories of midnight extractions and classified briefings. Someone was using military protocols to announce themselves, which meant they knew exactly who she really was. She walked to the door with the same calm demeanor she'd maintained for 15 years of teaching, but her mind was already calculating angles, distances, and the best way to protect 23 innocent children from whatever was about to walk through that door. "Miss Diana?" whispered Emma, sensing the subtle change in her teacher's energy. "Is everything okay?" Diana smiled down at the little girl, the same warm smile that had comforted thousands of scraped knees and homesick tears over the years. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have important conversations, but you're always safe with me." It was a promise she intended to keep, no matter what it cost her. Diana opened the door. Standing in the hallway were 3 men who looked like they'd been carved from granite and pressed into dress uniforms. The lead figure was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of posture that screamed military even without the Navy SEAL trident pin gleaming on his chest. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and when they met Diana's, she saw a flicker of something she hadn't expected: recognition. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Commander Brett Garrison, United States Navy. We need to speak with you privately." Diana's expression remained perfectly composed, the same patient smile she wore when parents came to discuss their children's progress. But inside, her tactical mind was racing through scenarios, calculating threats, assessing the 2 other SEALs flanking Garrison. They were younger, alert, hands positioned with the casual readiness of men accustomed to violence. Behind them, she could see Dr. Helen Bradford, the school principal, wringing her hands nervously. "Of course," Diana replied, her voice carrying the same warm professionalism she'd cultivated for 15 years. "Let me just settle my students with an activity." She turned back to her classroom, where 23 pairs of curious eyes watched the uniformed strangers with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Diana clapped her hands twice, a signal her students knew meant immediate attention. "All right, my little artists, we're going to have some special quiet time. I want everyone to go to the reading corner and choose your favorite book. Lily, you're my special helper today. Can you make sure everyone finds a book?" Lily beamed with pride at being chosen, completely unaware that Diana had selected her because she was the most responsible child in the class and would keep the others calm. Diana moved through the room with practiced efficiency, ensuring each child was settled with the book, speaking in soft, reassuring tones that masked the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Miss Diana," whispered Emma, tugging on her teacher's dress, "are those soldiers going to arrest you?" The question hit Diana like a physical blow, but she knelt down to Emma's level, placing gentle hands on her small shoulders. "Oh, sweetheart, no. Sometimes grown-ups just need to have important conversations. I'll be right back, okay? And remember, you're always safe here."
Diana stood and walked toward the door, pausing to activate the classroom's security protocol, a system she had personally researched and recommended to the school board 3 years earlier. With the press of a discrete button, the door would lock automatically if she didn't return within 30 minutes, and an alert would be sent to the main office. In the hallway, Principal Bradford looked pale and confused. "Diana, these gentlemen said they needed to speak with you about a security matter. I told them we could use my office." "That won't be necessary," Garrison interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We need privacy." Diana assessed the situation with the same calm attention she once brought to hostage negotiations. 3 military personnel, unknown agenda, civilian authority figure present but clearly not in control. The smart play was cooperation until she understood the threat level. "The teacher's lounge is empty this time of day," Diana suggested. "Dr. Bradford, could you please keep an eye on my students? They're having quiet reading time." The principal nodded eagerly, grateful to have something concrete to do in a situation that clearly made her uncomfortable. Diana led the SEALs down the corridor, her pace unhurried, her posture relaxed. To any observer, she looked like a teacher accommodating an unexpected but routine request. Only someone with extensive military training would notice how she positioned herself to maintain sight lines to exits and how her steps fell in a pattern that would make it difficult for someone to predict her next movement. The teacher's lounge was a cheerful space filled with motivational posters and the lingering scent of coffee. Diana gestured to the round table where she had graded thousands of assignments over the years, where she had shared lunch breaks and swapped stories about difficult parents with colleagues who thought they knew everything about her. Garrison didn't sit. Instead, he pulled out a tablet and placed it on the table, the screen facing Diana. "Ma'am, I need you to look at this photograph and tell me if you recognize the person." Diana glanced down at the screen and felt her carefully constructed world tilt on its axis. Staring back at her was a high-resolution satellite image taken 8 years ago in Afghanistan. She was in full tactical gear, her face partially obscured by night vision goggles, but unmistakably her. The timestamp showed the date of Operation Silent Dawn, the mission that had officially ended her military career and unofficially saved hundreds of lives. For a split second, Diana felt the weight of the rifle in her hands, heard the echo of gunfire, smelled the acrid smoke of explosives. Then she blinked, and she was back in a teacher's lounge that smelled like coffee and disinfectant, surrounded by men who somehow knew her deepest secret.
"I'm sorry," Diana said, her voice steady as a rock, "but I don't know what this has to do with me. I am a kindergarten teacher." Garrison's expression didn't change, but one of the younger SEALs shifted slightly, a tell that Diana read as easily as she read picture books to her students. They weren't here to arrest her. They weren't here to expose her. They were here because they needed something. "Ma'am," Garrison continued, his tone respectful but insistent, "we know who you are. Diana Holloway is a solid identity, well-constructed, completely legitimate. But before you were Diana Holloway, you were Phoenix." The code name hit her like a physical blow. Phoenix, the call sign she'd earned after rising from the ashes of a mission gone wrong in Syria, coming back stronger and more deadly than before. The name whispered in classified briefings and spoken with reverence by operators who understood what it meant to survive the impossible. Diana's hands remained folded calmly in her lap, but every muscle in her body was coiled like a spring. "I think there's been some mistake. I've been teaching kindergarten for 15 years. Before that, I was getting my education degree. I've never been in the military." "You have a small scar above your left eyebrow, shrapnel from an IED in Kandahar 2012. You favor your right side when you walk because you took a sniper's bullet to the left thigh in 2014. And when you opened that door, you positioned yourself to maintain sight lines to 3 separate exit routes while keeping us in your peripheral vision." Diana studied the young man more carefully. There was something familiar about his eyes, something that triggered a memory she'd spent years trying to suppress. "And you are?" "Petty Officer Miguel Santos, ma'am. You saved my life in Mosul." The world stopped. Miguel Santos, the kid fresh out of Bud's training who'd been assigned to her unit as a radio operator. 19 years old, scared out of his mind but trying to prove himself worthy of the trident. She remembered him crouched behind a concrete barrier, blood streaming from a head wound, his radio crackling with desperate calls for extraction while enemy fire pinned them down. She remembered making a choice that defied every tactical protocol, leaving her covered position to reach him, carrying him 300 meters through hostile territory to the extraction point, taking a bullet in the process that still ached when the weather changed. "Miguel," she said softly, and for the first time since opening her classroom door, her carefully maintained facade cracked just slightly. "You're supposed to be dead. So are you, man. But we're both here, and right now we need Phoenix more than we need Diana Holloway." Garrison leaned forward, his expression grave. "Ma'am, there's a situation. Someone has been using your identity, your methods, your tactical signature. 3 weeks ago, a Black Ops team hit a terrorist safe house in Syria using protocols that match your operational style exactly. The problem is, Phoenix has been dead for 8 years, and the mission went sideways. 12 civilians died." Diana felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible." "Is it? Because right now there's a congressional hearing being convened to investigate Phoenix's return to active duty. Senators are asking questions about ghost operatives and unauthorized missions. And in about 6 hours, your real name is going to be declassified and released to the press." The room fell silent except for the distant sound of children's laughter down the hall. Her children, her students, the innocent lives she'd spent 15 years protecting and nurturing. "What do you want from me?" Diana asked quietly. "We want you to help us find out who is using your identity, and we want you to help us stop them before they destroy everything you've built here." Diana looked toward the door, knowing that 23 5-year-olds were waiting for her to return, trusting that she would keep them safe, just as she had every day for 15 years. But she also knew that if someone was using Phoenix's methods to commit war crimes, those children would never be safe as long as that threat existed. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 72 hours before the media connects Diana Holloway to Phoenix. After that, this peaceful life you've built disappears forever." Diana closed her eyes and saw a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, beautiful and transformed but forever changed from what it had been before. Some metamorphoses, she realized, couldn't be reversed. "All right," she said, opening her eyes with the steel that once made her one of the most feared operatives in the world. "Let's find out who is trying to destroy my life." The weight of her true identity settled over Diana like armor she'd forgotten she was wearing. For 8 years, she'd been Diana Holloway, gentle kindergarten teacher, lover of butterflies, reader of picture books. But as she sat in that teacher's lounge, surrounded by the smell of coffee and the distant echo of children's laughter, memories began flooding back with crystalline clarity. "Before we go any further," Diana said, her voice taking on a tone that Miguel remembered from briefings in war zones, "I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Show me everything." Garrison nodded and swiped to the next screen on his tablet. A series of photographs appeared: surveillance images from Syria, satellite feeds, aftermath shots of the safe house that had been hit. Diana studied each image with the trained eye of someone who'd once analyzed similar intelligence to plan operations that never officially happened. The target was a high-value compound in Aleppo, Garrison explained. Intelligence suggested it was being used as a coordination center for terrorist activities. The team that hit it used Phoenix protocols, your protocols. Simultaneous breach from 3 points, exactly 17 seconds between entry and neutralization of sentries, explosive placement that matched your signature style from Operation Silent Dawn. Diana's jaw tightened as she recognized her own tactical innovations being described. Those weren't protocols found in any manual. They were techniques she'd developed through trial and error, written in blood and paid for with the lives of teammates who hadn't made it home. "The problem," Miguel continued, "is that when the smoke cleared, they found 12 civilians in the basement, women and children who'd been using the building as shelter.
The intel was either wrong or it was deliberately falsified, Diana finished. Someone wanted those civilians dead and needed Phoenix to take the blame. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the playground where her students had been playing just an hour ago. The normalcy of the scene, children on swings, teachers supervising recess, felt surreal against the backdrop of what she was learning. "There's more," Garrison said quietly. "This wasn't the first time. Over the past 6 months, there have been 4 other incidents, Black Ops missions using Phoenix's methods, but with outcomes that don't match your psychological profile. Excessive casualties, unnecessary destruction, targets that don't fit the strategic value Phoenix would have prioritized." Diana turned back to face them, and Miguel felt a chill as he saw the transformation beginning. The soft edges that 15 years of teaching kindergarten had given her were starting to sharpen back into the lethal precision he remembered from their time in the field. "Someone has been studying me," Diana said. "Not just my methods, but my entire operational history. They know how Phoenix thinks, how she moves, how she kills. But they don't understand why she kills." "Ma'am," the third SEAL spoke for the first time, a young man whose name tag read Williams. "Phoenix never took a shot that wasn't necessary," Diana explained, settling back into tactical analysis mode. "Every target was verified through multiple sources. Every civilian casualty was treated as a mission failure, regardless of the strategic outcome. Whoever is using my identity understands the how, but not the why." She paused, a memory surfacing from the depths of her mind. A conversation in a secure facility 8 years ago when she'd been debriefed after Operation Silent Dawn. "There was someone," Diana said slowly. "During my final debriefing, I was interviewed by a man who claimed to be CIA, but something felt off. He asked very specific questions about my tactical innovations, wanted detailed explanations of techniques that weren't in any official report. I thought it was standard protocol, but you were being harvested," Garrison finished grimly. "Someone was building a playbook." Diana nodded, feeling pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "He knew things about my previous missions that weren't in the files I had access to. Details that suggested he'd been watching me for years, studying my patterns." "Do you remember his name?" Miguel asked. "He introduced himself as Agent Morrison, but when I tried to follow up on some discrepancies in my debrief, I was told no such agent existed in the CIA database." The 3 SEALs exchanged glances that didn't go unnoticed by Diana. "You know something," she said. It wasn't a question. Garrison hesitated, then made a decision. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications between unknown operatives using a code name we hadn't seen before, Shadow Phoenix. The voice on the recordings was electronically altered, but the tactical language, the operational terminology, it was all yours. Diana felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the teacher's lounge. "Someone isn't just using my methods, they're using my voice, my command style. They're creating a perfect replica of Phoenix."
Which brings us to why we're here, Miguel said. "We need the real Phoenix to help us catch the fake one, because in 67 hours, a Summit subcommittee is going to receive a classified briefing about Phoenix's return to active duty. They're going to see the civilian casualties, the unauthorized missions, the complete breakdown of operational discipline that's being attributed to you." "And then?" Diana asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then, they're going to declassify your identity and issue a kill order," Garrison said bluntly. "Phoenix will be designated a rogue operative, a clear and present danger to national security. Every allied intelligence service will have your photo and orders to terminate on site." Diana sat back down, the full scope of the trap finally becoming clear. Someone had spent years studying her, learning her methods, and was now systematically destroying her reputation while using her identity to commit war crimes. In less than 3 days, the life she'd built as Diana Holloway would be over, and the legend of Phoenix would be twisted into something monstrous. "There's something else," William said quietly. "The voice analysis on the Shadow Phoenix communications, our tech guys ran it through every possible filter, trying to strip away the electronic distortion." "And?" Diana prompted. "The bass vocal patterns, they match someone from your old unit. Someone who would have had access to recordings of your voice, your command style, your tactical preferences. Diana's blood ran cold. That's impossible. Everyone from my unit is either dead or accounted for in witness protection. That's what we thought too, Garrison said, until yesterday when one of the names on the casualties list from Operation Silent Dawn turned up on airport security footage in Ankara, Turkey. He swiped to a new photo on the tablet. Diana found herself staring at a grainy but unmistakable image of a man she'd watched die 8 years ago, a man who'd been her closest ally and most trusted teammate until the mission that was supposed to be their last. Viktor Petrov. Shadow. You know him? Miguel asked. Diana's laugh was bitter, hollow. I should. He was my partner for 3 years. We ran more than a dozen operations together. He knew my methods better than anyone, because we developed half of them together. She stared at the photograph, remembering the last time she'd seen Victor alive, bleeding out in a collapsing building while she made the impossible choice to save the hostages instead of going back for him. I left him to die. It was the right tactical decision, but I left him to die. If he survived, if he's been alive all these years thinking I abandoned him, then he's had 8 years to plan the perfect revenge, destroy your reputation, turn your legend into a nightmare, and make sure you take the blame for his war crimes. Diana closed her eyes, seeing not the cheerful chaos of her classroom, but the cold, calculated mind of a man who'd once been her closest friend and was now her most dangerous enemy. Victor always said that betrayal was the only wound that never healed. Looks like he was right. When she opened her eyes, the last traces of Diana Holloway, kindergarten teacher, were gone. In her place sat Phoenix, the ghost who had haunted international intelligence agencies for years and who was about to be resurrected for one final mission. "All right," she said, her voice carrying the deadly calm that had once made terrorists wake up screaming. "Let's go hunting."
The transformation wasn't immediate, but Miguel could see it happening. The way Diana's posture shifted from the gentle curves of a kindergarten teacher to the predatory stillness of an apex predator. Her eyes, which had been warm and nurturing just hours ago, now held the cold calculation he remembered from their missions in hostile territory. "First, I need to get back to my students," Diana said, standing with fluid grace that spoke of countless hours of combat training. "They can't be left alone, and I need to maintain normal patterns until we have a plan." As they walked back toward her classroom, Diana's mind was already working through contingencies. How much does the school administration know? Principal Bradford was told this was a routine security consultation. As far as anyone here knows, we're evaluating the school's emergency protocols. Good, that gives us cover. Diana paused outside her classroom door, her hand resting on the handle. I need 12 hours to arrange things here. These children have been my responsibility for 15 years. I won't abandon them without ensuring they're protected. Through the small window in the door, they could see 23 5-year-olds still quietly reading, with Principal Bradford sitting nervously at Diana's desk. The sight of those innocent faces hit Diana like a physical blow. These children had never known war, never seen the kind of darkness that had defined her previous life. They knew her as Miss Diana, who sang silly songs about the days of the week and gave the best hugs when they scraped their knees. "Ma'am," Miguel said softly, "I know this is hard, but we might not have 12 hours. Our intel suggests Shadow Phoenix is planning something big. If Victor is behind this, he won't wait long for his final move." Diana turned to face him, and Miguel saw something in her eyes that made him take an involuntary step back. It was the look she'd worn during their most dangerous missions, a combination of protective fury and lethal focus that had made her legendary among special operations personnel. "Then we better work fast," Diana said. She opened the classroom door, and immediately 23 faces turned toward her with relief and excitement. "Miss Diana," Emma called out, "are you okay? Those soldiers looked very serious."
Diana smiled, slipping back into her teacher persona so seamlessly that Garrison wondered if he was watching the greatest actress in the world or simply a woman who'd learned to compartmentalize trauma with surgical precision. "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart. These nice men were just asking me some questions about how to keep schools safe. It's almost lunchtime. Who's ready for the cafeteria?" As her students lined up with practiced efficiency of 5-year-olds who'd been well-trained in classroom procedures, Diana caught Bradford's eye. "Dr. Bradford, could you take them to lunch? I need a few more minutes with our visitors." "Of course, Diana. Children, let's show our guests how quietly we can walk to the cafeteria." As the children filed out, Diana heard Emma whisper to her friend, "Miss Diana knows soldiers. That's so cool." If only she knew, Diana thought grimly. Once the classroom was empty, Diana moved to her desk and began pulling out items that would have seemed innocuous to any observer. A small mirror compact, a Mont Blanc pen that was slightly heavier than it should be, and a flash drive disguised as a butterfly-shaped USB stick. "Contingency supplies?" Garrison asked, recognizing operational preparation when he saw it. "Old habits," Diana replied, clipping the pen to her blouse and dropping the flash drive into her pocket. "The mirror has a digital camera, the pen has a GPS tracker and emergency beacon, and the flash drive contains enough cryptocurrency to disappear completely if necessary." Miguel shook his head in amazement. "You've been planning for this day for 8 years?" "I've been planning for this day since I learned what real evil looks like. Victor taught me that the most dangerous enemy is the one who knows you better than you know yourself." She moved to the window where her butterfly garden sat, gently touching one of the chrysalises that was showing signs of emerging. "You know, I tell my students that butterflies remember being caterpillars, but they can never go back to that life. Once the transformation happens, there's no reversing it. Are you having second thoughts?" Williams hashed, sharp, humorless. "Victor is using my identity to murder innocent people. He's turned everything I fought for, everything I sacrificed for, into a weapon against the defenseless. Second thoughts are a luxury I can't afford." She turned back to face them, and Williams felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. This wasn't the kindergarten teacher who'd been reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar a few hours ago. This was Phoenix, the operator who'd eliminated high-value targets across 3 continents without leaving a trace. "What's our timeline?" Diana asked.
Garrison checked his watch. "Last reliable intelligence puts Victor in Istanbul, but that was 18 hours ago. He could be anywhere by now. Our best lead is a safe house in Prague where Shadow Phoenix communications have been traced." Prague, Diana mused. Victor always liked that city. Said it reminded him of a chessboard, beautiful on the surface, but every move was part of a larger strategy. "You think he's baiting us?" Miguel asked. "I think Victor has been playing a game that started 8 years ago in Afghanistan, and we're just now realizing we're pieces on his board." Diana walked to the classroom's computer and began typing rapidly. "But he made one mistake. He thinks he knows me better than I know myself. But people change. The woman who left him to die 8 years ago isn't the same person standing here today." "What's different?" Garrison asked. Diana gestured toward the empty desks, the colorful artwork on the walls, the reading corner where her students spent their quiet time. 8 years ago, I was a weapon. I was good at my job, but I was empty inside. These children filled that emptiness. They taught me what I was really fighting for." She finished typing and turned back to them. "I just sent a message to my substitute teacher requesting coverage for the rest of the week. Family emergency. It's not technically a lie." "What about the children?" Miguel asked. "When they come back from lunch and you're gone?" Diana's expression softened for just a moment. "Dr. Bradford will tell them that Miss Diana had to help some people who were in trouble, but that she'll think about them every day. It's what I always tell them when one of their classmates moves away." "And that's enough?" Williams asked. "It has to be," Diana replied, her voice carrying a weight that spoke of difficult choices and necessary sacrifices. "Because if I don't stop Victor, those children will never be safe. None of them will."
She moved to her closet and pulled out a black duffel bag that had been hidden behind boxes of construction paper and holiday decorations. Inside were items that definitely didn't belong in a kindergarten classroom: tactical clothing, communication equipment, and a custom Sig Sauer P320 that had been modified by someone who understood that sometimes teachers needed to protect their students from threats that administrators couldn't imagine. "Jesus," Williams breathed. "You've been ready for war this whole time." "I've been ready to protect innocent people this whole time," Diana corrected. "The war part is just methodology." She slung the bag over her shoulder and took one last look around the classroom that had been her sanctuary for 15 years. The butterfly garden, the reading corner, the tiny chairs where her students learned about kindness and sharing and believing in themselves. "Prague it is," Diana said, heading for the door. "But first, we need to stop by my apartment. If Victor really has been watching me for 8 years, he'll expect Phoenix to emerge with standard equipment. He won't expect what Diana Holloway has been collecting." As they left Riverside Elementary, Diana didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. The metamorphosis was complete. The gentle kindergarten teacher who read stories about hungry caterpillars had transformed into something far more dangerous. Victor wanted to play games with Phoenix. He was about to learn that some butterflies were born with razor-sharp wings.
Diana's apartment was a study in carefully constructed normalcy. The living room held comfortable furniture, shelves lined with children's books and educational materials, and photos of her students from over the years. But as the three seals watched, Diana moved through the space with purpose, revealing layers of preparation that had been hidden in plain sight for 8 years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She pressed a hidden panel behind a bookshelf filled with picture books, revealing a compact but sophisticated surveillance system. Multiple screens flickered to life, showing feeds from around the apartment building, the school, and various points throughout Millbrook. Diana had been watching, always watching, ready for the day her past would catch up with her. "Paranoid much?" Williams muttered. "Thorough," Diana corrected, her fingers flying across a keyboard as she accessed encrypted files. "Victor taught me that the enemy you don't see coming is the one who kills you." The screens suddenly flashed red, and Diana's blood ran cold. Multiple alerts were triggering simultaneously across her surveillance network. "We have a problem," she said, pointing to one of the monitors. "There's been unusual activity at the school for the past hour. 3 unmarked vehicles, personnel conducting what looks like surveillance." Garrison leaned in, studying the grainy footage. "Could be federal agents following up on our visit." "Could be," Diana agreed. "But look at the movement patterns. These aren't law enforcement sweeps. They're hunting patterns." On another screen, Diana pulled up global intelligence feeds that she definitely shouldn't have had access to as a kindergarten teacher. Miguel whistled low as classified satellite data scrolled past. "How the hell do you have access to NSA surveillance networks?" "Insurance policy," Diana replied tersely. "When you've been declared dead by your own government, you learn to keep tabs on who might decide to make it official." The feeds were showing disturbing patterns. In the past 24 hours, there had been a sudden spike in chatter on known terrorist communication channels. Keywords that made Diana's skin crawl: Phoenix, Silent Dawn, kindergarten, Vermont. "Victor isn't just planning to frame me," Diana realized, her voice tight with controlled fury. "He's planning to use my connection to the school as part of whatever he's building toward." She pulled up a file that made all the 3 seals go rigid. It was a detailed schematic of Riverside Elementary, complete with guard positions, entry points, and what looked like tactical annotations. "Son of a bitch," Miguel breathed. "He's going to hit the school." "Not hit," Diana corrected, studying the markings with the eye of someone who'd planned similar operations. "This isn't an assault pattern. It's a hostage scenario. He wants to draw me out using the children as bait." The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of traffic outside. Diana stared at the screen, seeing not just tactical markings, but the faces of 23 5-year-olds who trusted her to keep them safe. "There's more," she said quietly, opening another file.
Victor has been busy during his 8 years of supposed death. Look at this. The screen filled with intelligence reports from across Europe and the Middle East. A pattern emerged of Black Ops missions gone wrong, civilian casualties, and tactical signatures that bore uncomfortable similarities to Phoenix's methods, but cruder, more brutal, lacking the surgical precision that had defined her operations. He's been practicing, Garrison observed grimly, building up to this. No, Diana said, studying the timeline more carefully. He's been recruiting. Look at the operational complexity progression. These early missions were learning exercises, but the recent ones show multiple operatives working in coordination. She highlighted several incidents across the timeline. Prague, 6 months ago. Ankara, 3 months ago. Each one more sophisticated than the last. Victor hasn't just survived, he's built an organization. Williams pulled out his secure phone. I need to call this in. If he's planning to hit an elementary school, with what evidence? Diana interrupted. Surveillance footage of unmarked cars? Intelligence that I'm not supposed to have access to? By the time official channels authorize protection for the school, Victor will have already made his move. So what do you suggest? Garrison asked. Diana was already moving, pulling tactical gear from hidden compartments throughout the apartment. We split up. Miguel, you and Williams get to the school. Establish perimeter security and make sure those children get home safely today. Create some excuse. Gas leak, electrical problem, whatever. Just get them out of that building. And us? Garrison asked. You and I are going hunting, Diana replied, checking the action on a weapon that looked nothing like standard military issue. Victor wants Phoenix to come out and play. He's about to get his wish.
She paused at a framed photo on her dresser. A picture of her current kindergarten class taken just last month. 23 smiling faces, including Emma with her missing front tooth and Lily with her shy smile. Diana touched the glass gently. 8 years ago, I left Victor to die to save 37 hostages I'd never met, she said quietly. Today, I'm going to finish what I should have finished then, to save 23 children who mean everything to me. Diana, Miguel said softly, what if this is exactly what he wants? What if he's counting on you coming after him? Diana's smile was sharp as a blade. Then he's about to learn the difference between the Phoenix who fought for her country and the Phoenix who fights for her family. She activated a dead man's switch on her surveillance system. If she didn't check in every 12 hours, the entire network would dump its contents to every major news outlet and intelligence agency in the world. Victor's war crimes, his survival, his plans, everything would be exposed. Insurance, she explained to Garrison's questioning look. If Victor kills me, he doesn't get to disappear again. As they prepared to leave, Diana took one last look around the apartment that had been her refuge for 8 years. The comfortable couch where she'd graded papers and planned lessons, the kitchen where she'd made countless cups of tea while worrying about struggling students, the bedroom where she'd slept peacefully, dreaming of butterfly gardens instead of firefights. Any regrets? Garrison asked, recognizing the finality in her actions. Diana thought of Emma's laugh, of Lily's quiet hugs, of 23 children who had taught her what it meant to love something worth protecting. Just one, she said. That it took me 8 years to realize that Phoenix was never about the mission. Phoenix was about protecting the innocent. Everything else was just target practice. Her secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. Unknown number, but Diana recognized the communication protocol immediately. Her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, she opened the message. It was a single photograph, the exterior of Riverside Elementary, taken from the same surveillance position she'd spotted earlier. But it was the timestamp that made her blood freeze. The photo had been taken 30 minutes ago, when her students were at lunch. Below the image was a single line of text. The butterfly remembers being a caterpillar, but does the teacher remember being a killer? Let's find out. V. Diana stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it and pocketed the phone. Change of plans, she said.
her voice carrying the cold precision that had once made her the most feared operator in 3 theaters of war. "We're not hunting Victor." "What do you mean?" Garrison asked. Diana checked her weapon one final time and headed for the door. "We're going to war." As they left the apartment, Diana didn't look back. The woman who had read stories about hungry caterpillars and taught children about the magic of transformation was gone. In her place walked Phoenix, risen from 8 years of ashes, and this time she wasn't fighting for her country or her unit or even her own survival. This time, she was fighting for love, and that made her more dangerous than Victor could possibly imagine.
The drive to Riverside Elementary took 12 minutes through Millbrook's quiet streets, but for Diana, those 12 minutes felt like an eternity. Every red light, every slow-moving car, every second that ticked by was another moment that Victor could be moving his pieces into position around the school that housed the most important people in her world. Garrison drove while Diana coordinated with Miguel and Williams via encrypted comms. The reports coming back made her stomach clench with familiar pre-mission tension. "Phoenix, this is Hawk," Miguel's voice crackled through the earpiece, using call signs from their shared past. "We've got eyes on the school. 3 vehicles maintaining overwatch positions, but no movement toward the building. Looks like they're waiting for something." "Copy that, Hawk. Status on evacuation." "In progress." Principal Bradford wasn't happy about the sudden electrical emergency, but she's cooperating. Buses are loading now. Diana allowed herself a moment of relief. Whatever Victor was planning, at least her students would be safe. But the relief was short-lived as Williams' voice cut through the comm. "Phoenix, we've got a problem. There's a 4th vehicle, black sedan, moving toward the school's main entrance. Driver matches the photo you showed us of Victor." Diana's blood turned to ice. "He's not waiting for the children to leave. He's coming for me while they're still there." She made a decision that went against every tactical protocol she had ever learned. "Hawk, I'm going in. Maintain perimeter, but do not, repeat, do not engage unless civilians are in immediate danger." "Diana, that's suicide," Garrison said, pulling the car to a stop 2 blocks from the school. "If this is a trap—" "It is a trap," Diana replied, checking her sidearm one final time. "But Victor made one crucial miscalculation. He thinks I'll hesitate to pull the trigger because of our history. He's wrong." She opened the car door, then paused, looking back at Garrison. "If I don't make it out, make sure the truth gets told. Victor dies here today, or he disappears and comes back for those children again in 6 months or a year. I won't let that happen." "Diana!" "Promise me," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 8 years of guilt and 15 years of love for children who called her Ms. Diana. "I promise," Garrison said quietly. Diana moved through the school's familiar hallways like a ghost, her footsteps silent on linoleum she'd walked thousands of times. But everything felt different now, sharper, more dangerous. The cheerful bulletin boards and colorful artwork that had once brought her joy now felt like a mockery of the violence that was about to unfold in a place that should have been sacred. She could hear the controlled chaos of the evacuation, teachers calling out names, children asking questions, the rumble of bus engines outside. The sounds of innocence being shepherded to safety while predators circled just beyond the perimeter. Diana's earpiece crackled. "Phoenix, Victor's inside. He bypassed the main entrance and came through the maintenance access. He's heading toward the administrative wing." Of course he was. Victor knew her well enough to predict that she'd want to ensure the evacuation was complete before engaging. He was counting on her protective instincts to drive her toward the exact location where she could do the most damage to innocent people if things went wrong. Diana changed course, moving toward the gymnasium instead. If Victor wanted to play psychological games, she'd give him a different kind of lesson. One about the difference between the Phoenix he remembered and the woman she'd become. The gymnasium was empty, its polished floor reflecting the afternoon sunlight streaming through high windows.
Diana positioned herself in the center of the space, equidistant from all exits, her weapon drawn but held low. She didn't have to wait long. Viktor Petrov entered through the same doors she'd used, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd never lost the muscle memory of violence. 8 years had changed him. His hair was gray now, his face marked by scars that told the story of a man who'd crawled back from the edge of death. But his eyes held the same cold intelligence that had once made him one of the most effective operatives in Unit Blackwater. "Hello, Diana. Or should I call you Ms. Diana? I have to admit, kindergarten teacher was not the career path I would have predicted for Phoenix." "Victor?" Diana kept her weapon lowered, but her stance ready. "You look good for a dead man." "Death was educational," Victor replied, his own weapon visible but not raised. "It taught me patience, planning, the value of a long game played correctly." "Is that what this is? A game?" Victor's smile was sharp, predatory. "Everything is a game, Diana. You taught me that. The mission in Afghanistan, leaving me to die while you saved those hostages, that was just you playing the game better than I did. I made a tactical decision. 37 lives versus 1.
Ah, but you're wrong, Victor said, beginning to circle slowly, maintaining distance. It wasn't 1 life versus 37. It was our partnership versus your conscience, and you chose to sacrifice us for strangers. Diana matched his movement, keeping the distance constant. "And now you want revenge?" "Revenge?" Victor laughed, the sound echoing off the gymnasium walls. "Oh, Diana, you still think too small. I don't want revenge. I want you to understand what you really are." He gestured toward the hallways beyond the gymnasium, where the sounds of evacuation were growing fainter. "You've spent 8 years playing house with children, pretending to be something soft and nurturing. But I know what you really are. We both do." "I know exactly what I am. The question is whether you remember what you used to be." "What I used to be was naive," Victor said. "I used to believe in causes, in missions, in the idea that we were making the world better. But lying in that rubble in Afghanistan, bleeding out while you walked away, I realized the truth. We're not heroes, Diana. We're weapons. And weapons don't retire. They just wait to be used again." "You're right about one thing," Diana said, raising her weapon in a smooth, practiced motion. "We are weapons. But you forgot the most important part of weapons training." "Which is?" "Know your target," Diana said, her voice carrying the deadly calm that had once made her legendary. "Those children in my classroom, they're not my weakness, Victor. They're my strength. They taught me the difference between killing because you can and killing because you must." Victor's expression shifted, uncertainty flickering across his features for the first time. "You won't shoot me, Diana. Not here. Not in their school. You've gone soft." "Have I?" Diana asked, and there was something in her voice that made Victor take an involuntary step backward. "Let me tell you what those children taught me, Victor. They taught me that some things are worth dying for. But more importantly, they taught me that some things are worth killing for." The gymnasium fell silent except for the distant sound of the last bus pulling away from the school. Diana felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her students were safe. Now there was only the mission. "The children are gone," Diana said, her weapon now trained directly on Victor's chest, "which means there's nothing holding me back anymore." Victor raised his own weapon, but Diana could see the hesitation in his eyes. He'd expected the soft kindergarten teacher, the woman who'd chosen mercy over vengeance. He hadn't prepared for Phoenix, fully awakened,
fighting for not country or unit, but for love. You were always the better shot, Victor said quietly. I still am, Diana replied. The first shot shattered the silence of Riverside Elementary's gymnasium, echoing through halls that had only ever known the sounds of children's laughter and learning. When the echo faded, only one person was left standing.
Diana stood motionless in the center of the gymnasium, her weapon still trained on the empty space where Victor had been standing seconds before. The shot had been perfect, center mass, exactly where she'd aimed. But Victor Petrov hadn't survived 8 years in the shadows by being slow or predictable. He'd rolled left at the last possible second, using the momentum to carry himself behind the gymnasium's retractable bleachers. Diana heard the distinctive metallic click of a fresh magazine being loaded and knew she had perhaps 3 seconds before he reemerged with a clear firing solution. Still fast, she called out, moving smoothly toward cover behind the scoring table, but not fast enough. Fast enough to stay alive, Victor's voice echoed from somewhere in the maze of bleacher supports. You always did telegraph your shots, Diana. Too much time thinking, not enough instinct. Diana smiled grimly. He was right about her old patterns, but he was working from 8-year-old intelligence. The woman who'd hesitated before pulling triggers had been replaced by someone who understood that hesitation got children killed. Miguel, report, she whispered into her comm. All students evacuated safely. Building is clear except for you and the target. We've got the perimeter locked down. He's not leaving that building. Copy. Maintain distance. This ends here. Diana moves through the gymnasium with practiced silence, using skills that felt both foreign and familiar. 8 years of teaching kindergarten had given her unexpected advantages. She knew how to move without making noise because she'd spent countless hours navigating sleeping children during nap time. She understood patience because she'd spent years helping struggling students master basic concepts. And she knew how to think 3 steps ahead because managing 23 5-year-olds required constant tactical planning. A muzzle flash erupted from behind the bleachers, and Diana felt the bullet pass close enough to her ear that she could hear its distinctive whistle. She returned fire immediately, not at Victor's position, but at the structural support she'd calculated he'd need to use for his next movement. The metallic clang of the bullet striking steel was followed by Victor's surprised curse. Diana had always been good at reading terrain and predicting movement, but teaching had honed that skill to an almost supernatural level. When you spent years anticipating which direction a 5-year-old would run during a game of tag, predicting a trained operative's movement patterns became almost elementary. Clever, Victor called out, but you're still thinking like a teacher, not a killer. Maybe, Diana replied, moving to a new position, but you're thinking like the old phoenix. That's your mistake. He heard him moving, a soft scrape of fabric against metal that most people would have missed. But Diana had spent years listening for the subtle sounds that indicated when a child was getting out of bed during nap time or sneaking an extra cookie during snack time. Her hearing had been trained by necessity to detect the smallest disruptions in expected patterns. Victor emerged from behind a different set of bleachers, weapon raised, but Diana was already moving. She'd predicted his route based on the angles and cover available, the same way she'd learned to predict which child would need help with their shoelaces, or which one was about to have a meltdown. Her shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon clattering across the polished floor. But Victor wasn't finished. He rolled with the impact, coming up with a backup pistol that Diana hadn't accounted for. The gymnasium erupted in the symphony of gunfire as both operatives moved, shot, and repositioned in a deadly dance that would have been beautiful if it weren't so lethal. Diana's muscle memory was returning fully now, the way to move efficiently from cover to cover, how to present the smallest possible target while maintaining firing solutions, the mathematics of angles and ricochets that turned any space into a 3-dimensional battlefield. But something was different this time. 8 years ago, Diana had fought with cold precision, treating each engagement like a puzzle to be solved. Now, every movement was infused with purpose that went beyond mission parameters.
She wasn't fighting for abstract concepts like national security or operational objectives. She was fighting for Emma's laugh, for Lily's shy hugs, for the right of 23 children to grow up in a world where kindergarten teachers didn't have to be killers. "You can't keep this up forever," Victor shouted, his voice strained with pain from his shoulder wound. "When you make a mistake, and when I do," Diana replied, moving to a position that would give her a clear shot at Victor's next probable location. "That's the difference between us now, Victor. You're fighting for revenge. I'm fighting for love." Victor appeared exactly where she'd predicted, and Diana's shot was perfect, but at the last second, something in his expression changed. A flicker of the man he'd once been, the partner who'd saved her life more times than she could count.
The bullet went wide. Victor's return fire didn't. Diana felt the impact in her left side, a familiar, burning sensation that brought back memories of a dozen different firefights in a dozen different countries. But adrenaline and training kicked in, numbing the pain and sharpening her focus to a razor's edge. "First blood to me," Victor called out, but Diana could hear the confusion in his voice. He'd seen her hesitate, seen the moment of doubt that had cost her accuracy. Diana pressed her hand against the wound, feeling warm blood seeping between her fingers. The injury wasn't fatal, but it was slowing her down. Victor would capitalize on that advantage if she let him. "You still care," Victor continued, moving closer. "After everything I've done, everything I'm planning to do, you still can't bring yourself to kill your old partner?" Diana closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her students' faces. Emma with her missing tooth, asking if the soldiers were going to arrest her teacher. Lily, who'd barely spoken for the first month of school but now chattered constantly about butterflies and metamorphosis. Marcus, who reminded her so much of a young soldier she'd once known. When she opened her eyes, the hesitation was gone. "You're wrong, Victor," she said, emerging from cover with her weapon raised. "I can kill you, but not because you're my enemy." Victor turned toward her voice, his own weapon coming up, but Diana was already in motion. "I can kill you because those children deserve a world where monsters like us don't exist." The final exchange of gunfire lasted less than 3 seconds. When the echoes faded and the gun smoke cleared, Victor Petrov lay motionless on the gymnasium floor, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling, where colorful banners celebrated academic achievement and school spirit. Diana stood over him, her weapon still raised, making sure. After a moment, she lowered the gun and spoke into her comm. "Garrison, this is Phoenix. The threat is neutralized." "Are you injured?" Diana looked down at the spreading red stain on her side. "Nothing that won't heal." "We're coming in." "Negative," Diana said firmly. "Stay in position. I need to clean this up first." She knelt beside Victor's body, checking for the items she knew he'd be carrying. Encrypted phones, fake identification, contact information for the network he'd built during his years of supposed death. Evidence that would help intelligence agencies roll up whatever organization he'd assembled. But as she searched, Diana found something else. A photograph, worn and creased from years of handling. It showed her and Victor together during their partnership, both of them young and idealistic, standing in front of a forward operating base in Afghanistan. On the back, in Victor's handwriting, were 2 words: "Before everything." Diana stared at the photograph for a long moment, remembering the man Victor had been before Operation Silent Dawn, before the choices that had turned partners into enemies. Then she placed it back in his pocket and stood. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty gymnasium, "for all of it." But as she walked toward the exit, Diana felt no guilt, no regret for what she'd had to do. Victor had made his choice when he'd decided to threaten innocent children. She'd made hers when she'd chosen to protect them. The transformation was complete. Phoenix had risen from the ashes one last time, not to serve her country or her unit, but to serve something far more important. The future was safe. Her students were safe. And that was all that mattered.
The aftermath of violence in a place meant for children felt like sacrilege. Diana stood in the doorway of the gymnasium, looking back at the scene she'd have to explain to administrators, parents, and federal investigators.
blood on the polished floor where students played dodgeball, bullet holes in walls decorated with motivational posters about kindness and perseverance, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the lingering scent of disinfectant and childhood innocence. But Victor's death wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much larger problem. Diana's calm crackled as Garrison's voice cut through her contemplation. "Phoenix, we've got movement. 3 vehicles approaching the school from different directions. They're not official. No markings, no lights." Diana's blood chilled. Victor's organization. He'd been too confident, too sure of himself to come alone without backup. She'd been so focused on the immediate threat to her students that she'd forgotten the first rule of Black Ops. There's always another layer. "How many?" she asked, checking her ammunition. The firefight with Victor had depleted most of her supply. "At least 12 hostiles, possibly more. They're moving with military precision. This isn't some hastily assembled crew. These are professionals." Diana closed her eyes, running through tactical options in her mind. The school was a defensive nightmare. Too many entry points, too much open space, not enough cover. And she was injured, running low on ammunition, with no backup except 3 SEALs who were outnumbered 4-1. "McGill, what's the status on local law enforcement?" "Vermont State Police are en route, but they're 20 minutes out. Local Sheriff's Department is responding, but they're not equipped for this level of threat." 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. Victor's people would have control of the building in less than 5. Diana moved through the hallways of Riverside Elementary with grim purpose, her mind automatically cataloging defensive positions and escape routes. But as she passed her own classroom, she stopped. Through the small window in the door, she could see the butterfly garden on the windowsill, the chrysalises that her students had been so excited to watch emerge. One of them was beginning to crack open. Despite everything, the violence, the blood, the mortal danger closing in around her, Diana found herself stepping into the classroom. The emerging butterfly was struggling, its wings wet and crumpled as it worked to free itself from the confines of its former life. "I know the feeling," Diana murmured, gently touching the glass. Her calm crackled again. "Phoenix, we've got movement. 3 vehicles approaching the school from different directions. They're not official, no markings, no lights." Of course they did. Victor had been planning this for months, maybe years. He'd probably walked through this school, studied every corridor, every room, every possible advantage or disadvantage. He knew Diana would make her stand here, surrounded by reminders of the life she'd tried to build. Diana pulled the emergency lockdown alarm, sealing the school's exterior doors and activating the security protocols she'd helped design. It wouldn't stop professionals, but it would slow them down. "Garrison, I need you to do something for me," Diana said, moving to her desk and pulling out a sealed envelope she'd kept there for years. "What do you need?" "In my desk, there's a letter addressed to my students. If I don't make it out of here, make sure they get it. And make sure they understand that their teacher loved them enough to fight for their future." "Diana, don't talk like that. We can extract you." "Negative," Diana interrupted, checking the action on her sidearm. "This ends here, tonight. Either I stop Victor's organization permanently, or they disappear back into the shadows and come after those children again in 6 months or a year. I won't let that happen." She could hear movement in the corridors now, the soft whisper of tactical boots on linoleum, the barely audible rustle of equipment and gear. They were good, but Diana had home field advantage. She knew every sound this building made, every creak and settling noise that might mask or reveal movement. More importantly, she was fighting for something they couldn't understand. Diana moved to the school's central hub, the library, with its high ceilings, multiple levels, and countless hiding places among the stacks. It was terrain that favored a defender who knew the ground, and Diana had spent countless hours here helping students with research projects and reading programs. She positioned herself behind the circulation desk, using the computer terminals as cover while maintaining sightlines to the 3 main entrances. From her pocket, she pulled out a small device that looked like an ordinary flash drive, but was actually a sophisticated jamming unit that would disrupt their communications and coordination. The first team entered through the main library doors, 3 men in black tactical gear, moving with the fluid precision of special forces.
But as they advanced into the space, Diana could see they were making assumptions based on standard room-clearing protocols.
They didn't know about the hidden alcove behind the reference section, or the fact that the circulation desk was reinforced with steel plates that the school board had installed after Diana's security recommendations. They didn't know that she'd spent years learning every angle and sightline in this room while helping struggling readers find books that would spark their imagination. Diana waited until they were fully committed to their entry pattern, then activated the library's emergency lighting system. The space plunged into darkness except for the red emergency exit signs, giving her the advantage of familiarity with the terrain. The engagement was swift and brutal. Diana moved through the stacks like a ghost, using her intimate knowledge of the space to stay ahead of their search patterns. She took down the first operative with a silenced shot from behind the biography section, the second with a precision strike as he rounded the corner near children's literature. The third man was more experienced, more cautious. He'd recognized the tactical disadvantage and was calling for backup when Diana's jamming device cut off his communications. In the red-tinged darkness, hunter and hunted circled each other among shelves lined with books about friendship, adventure, and the triumph of good over evil. When Diana finally cornered him near the picture book section, the same area where she'd read to countless kindergarten classes, she could see fear in his eyes. Not fear of death, but fear of the unknown. He'd been expecting a retired operative, someone whose skills had been dulled by years of civilian life. Instead, he'd found something far more dangerous, a guardian who would do anything to protect what she loved. "Who sent you?" Diana demanded, her weapon trained on his center mass. "You killed a good man tonight," he gasped, blood seeping from a shoulder wound. "I killed a terrorist," Diana corrected. "Victor chose his path when he decided to threaten children." "This isn't over," the man said. "There are others. Victor was just one piece of something much larger." Diana felt her heart sink. She'd hoped that eliminating Victor would end the threat, but she'd always known it was probably too much to ask for. "Then I'll find them all," she said simply. The final shot echoed through the library, bouncing off shelves lined with stories about heroes and villains, about the power of courage in the face of impossible odds. Diana's comm crackled as Miguel's voice cut through the silence. "Phoenix, we're reading 2 more teams converging on your position. You need to get out of there." Diana looked around the library where she'd spent so many peaceful hours, now marked by violence and sacrifice. Through the windows, she could see flashing lights in the distance, local law enforcement finally arriving, though they'd be woefully unprepared for what they'd find. "No," Diana said, checking her remaining ammunition. "They want Phoenix. They're going to get everything she has left." She moved deeper into the school, toward the administrative wing where she'd first learned to love teaching, first discovered that her capacity for violence could be transformed into a capacity for protection. Behind her, the butterfly in her classroom finally broke free from its chrysalis, spreading its wings for the first time in a new world, where it would never again be bound by the limitations of what it had once been. Some transformations, Diana reflected, could only be completed through fire.
The administrative wing of Riverside Elementary had always been Diana's least favorite part of the school. Too many meetings about standardized test scores, too many bureaucratic discussions that pulled her away from what mattered, the children. But tonight, these sterile hallways with their institutional lighting and motivational posters would serve as the killing ground for the final chapter of Phoenix's story. Diana positioned herself in Principal Bradford's office, using the heavy wooden desk as cover while maintaining sightlines to the corridor beyond. She'd disabled the overhead lighting and activated the school's emergency protocols, bathing everything in the red glow of exit signs that cast long shadows and created a maze of darkness and blood-colored light. Through her earpiece, she could hear Garrison coordinating with Miguel and Williams as they engaged Victor's remaining operatives throughout the building.
The sounds of gunfire echoed through corridors where children had walked safely just hours earlier, each shot a reminder of how quickly innocence could be shattered by the violent realities of her former world. Phoenix, we've eliminated 4 hostiles, but there are at least 6 more, plus what looks like a command element, Miguel reported, his voice tight with controlled adrenaline. They're not just here for cleanup, they're conducting a deliberate search operation. Searching for what? Diana asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Intel. Garrison's voice cut through the comm. We found communications equipment on one of the bodies. They're not just here to eliminate witnesses, they're looking for something Victor left behind. Diana's mind raced through the possibilities. Victor had been too smart, too paranoid to keep sensitive information in obvious places, but he'd also been sentimental, attached to symbols and meanings that others might overlook. If he'd hidden something in the school, it would be somewhere significant, somewhere that meant something to their shared history. The butterfly garden. Diana cursed under her breath as the realization hit her. Victor had known about her classroom, had probably been watching her for months or even years. He would have seen the butterfly garden, understood its significance as a symbol of transformation and rebirth. It was exactly the kind of poetic hiding place that would appeal to his sense of dramatic irony. I need to get back to my classroom, Diana said into her comm. Negative, Phoenix. You've got at least 3 hostiles between you and that location, and your ammunition... They're not looking for me, Diana interrupted. They're looking for whatever Victor hid in my butterfly garden. If they get it, this whole operation has been for nothing. She could hear the argument forming in Garrison's voice, but Diana was already moving. She slipped out of the principal's office and into the darkened hallway, using skills that felt both foreign and familiar after 8 years of disuse. The muscle memory was returning fully now. How to move silently through hostile territory, how to read shadows and spaces for threats, how to become a ghost among ghosts. The corridor stretched before her like a tunnel of red-tinged darkness, broken by the occasional emergency light and the distant sound of tactical boots on linoleum. Diana moved with practiced patience, knowing that haste would get her killed and that her students' safety might depend on preventing Victor's organization from retrieving whatever intelligence he'd hidden. She rounded the corner toward the elementary wing and immediately spotted 2 figures in tactical gear positioned outside her classroom door. They were good, alert, properly positioned, maintaining overlapping fields of fire. But they were also focused on the immediate threat of the door itself, not watching for threats from behind. Diana had taught kindergarten long enough to know that sometimes the best solution was the simplest one. She pulled out the school's emergency whistle, a device every teacher carried for playground supervision, and threw it down the hallway behind the 2 operatives. The metallic clatter caused both men to turn toward the sound, weapons raised, for exactly the 2 seconds Diana needed to close distance and engage. The first man never saw her coming. The second managed to get his weapon halfway around before Diana's shot dropped him beside his partner. Diana stepped over their bodies and entered her classroom, feeling a profound sense of violation at seeing armed strangers in the space where her students learned about kindness and growth. The butterfly garden sat undisturbed on the windowsill, but Diana could see that someone had been examining it. Small scratches on the glass, fingerprints that didn't belong. She approached the garden carefully, studying each chrysalis and container with the attention to detail that had once made her an exceptional analyst of enemy positions and intentions. There, the smallest container, the one she'd told her students held a chrysalis that wasn't quite ready to emerge. The soil inside had been disturbed, and when Diana carefully lifted the small plant, she found a waterproof container no bigger than a pill bottle hidden beneath.
Inside the container was a micro SD card and a small note in Victor's handwriting. Phoenix, if you're reading this, then the game has ended differently than I planned. The information on this card will either save the world or destroy it. Choose wisely. Your old partner. Diana pocketed the card just as her comm exploded with urgent voices. Phoenix, we've got a problem. Miguel's voice was strained with exhaustion and pain. They've got backup coming, vehicles approaching from multiple directions. This isn't just a cleanup crew, it's a full tactical team. How many? Diana asked, moving back toward the classroom door. Too many, Garrison replied grimly. At least 20 hostiles in full combat gear. They're surrounding the building. Diana felt a familiar calm settle over her as she processed the tactical situation. She was injured, low on ammunition, outnumbered 20-1, and trapped in a building that offered limited defensive advantages against a coordinated assault. By every rational calculation, she should surrender or attempt to escape. But rationality had never been Phoenix's strongest suit. "Garrison, I need you to do something for me," Diana said, checking the remaining rounds in her weapon. "What do you need?" "Get that intelligence to people who can use it properly. Whatever Victor discovered, it's important enough that his organization is willing to risk exposure to retrieve it." "Diana, we can extract you." "No," Diana interrupted, looking around the classroom where she'd spent the happiest years of her life. "This is where it ends. This is where Phoenix finally gets to protect something that matters." She could hear movement in the hallways now, coordinated footsteps, tactical communications, the sound of professionals preparing for a final assault. They would come from multiple directions, overwhelming any defensive position through sheer force of numbers. But they would have to go through her first. Diana moved to the center of her classroom, positioning herself among the tiny desks and chairs where her students learned about the world. Around her were the artifacts of 15 years of teaching, artwork on the walls, books on the shelves, the butterfly garden where creatures transformed from one thing into something entirely different. She thought of Emma's laugh, of Lily's shy hugs, of 23 children who would grow up safe because their teacher had remembered how to be more than human when humanity wasn't enough. "Phoenix, they're moving," Miguel warned through the comm. "Copy that," Diana replied, raising her weapon toward the classroom door. "Tell my students that Miss Diana kept her promise." The door exploded inward, and Diana's final transformation began, not from caterpillar to butterfly, but from protector to legend, from teacher to something that would be whispered about in intelligence briefings for years to come. Phoenix had risen one last time, and this time she would burn bright enough to be seen from space. The final battle for Riverside Elementary had begun.
The firefight lasted exactly 7 minutes and 34 seconds, though for Diana, time seemed to move in slow motion. She fought from behind overturned desks where her students had learned to read, using tactics refined by 8 years of patience and precision. Every shot counted, because ammunition was limited. Every movement mattered because the enemy outnumbered her 20-1. But Phoenix had always performed best when the odds were impossible. The first wave came through the main classroom door. 3 operatives in full tactical gear who expected to find a cornered ex-operative. Instead, they found something far more dangerous, a mother defending her children, even though those children were safely miles away. Diana's shots were surgical, precise, each one guided by 15 years of protective instincts that had been honed on playground duty and lunch supervision. The second wave tried the windows, rappelling down from the roof in a coordinated assault that would have overwhelmed any normal defensive position. But Diana had spent years watching those same windows, knowing exactly how the afternoon light would silhouette figures against the glass, understanding the angles and approaches because she'd taught countless lessons about geometry and perspective to 5-year-olds who absorbed knowledge like sponges. By the time the third wave regrouped for their final assault, Diana was down to her last magazine and bleeding from wounds in her side and shoulder. But something had changed in the tactical situation. She could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer, and her comm was crackling with new voices. "Phoenix, this is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, 82nd Airborne. We're coming in hard with air support and a full tactical team. Hold your position." Diana blinked in surprise. The 82nd Airborne? That level of response meant someone very high up the chain of command had decided that whatever Victor had hitting was worth a full military intervention. "Copy that, Colonel," Diana replied, using an overturned bookshelf as cover while incoming file shredded the corner where her reading nook used to be. "Be advised, I'm in classroom 12 East Wing, multiple hostiles throughout the building."
Understood. We've got your teammates extracted and are moving to secure the building. ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Diana checked her ammunition. 4 rounds left. She looked around the classroom that had been her sanctuary for 15 years, now torn apart by violence, but still somehow sacred. The butterfly garden had been shattered by a stray bullet, its glass containers broken, soil scattered across the floor. But somehow, miraculously, the newly emerged butterfly had survived, clinging to a piece of broken glass with wings that caught the emergency lighting like stained glass windows. The final assault came with 30 seconds to spare before the cavalry arrived. 6 operatives moving with desperate precision because they knew their window was closing. Diana met them with everything she had left, not just ammunition and tactics, but 15 years of fierce love for children who had taught her that some things were worth any sacrifice. When the shooting stopped and the smoke cleared, Diana was still standing. Barely. Colonel Mitchell found her leaning against the classroom door, her weapon empty, her shirt soaked with blood, but her eyes still sharp with the vigilance that had kept her students safe for 15 years. "Ma'am, we need to get you medical attention," the colonel said, but Diana held up a hand. "The intelligence first," Diana said, pulling the micro SD card from her pocket. "Viktor Petrov left this. His people were willing to die for it, which means it's either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous." Colonel Mitchell took the card with reverence, recognizing its potential significance. "We'll analyze this immediately, but right now I need to see my students. I need to know they're safe." 6 hours later, Diana sat in a hospital bed, bandaged and stitched, but alive, watching the sunrise through a window that looked out over the mountains surrounding Millbrook. The doctors had wanted to keep her for observation, but she'd insisted on a room where she could see the school in the distance, even though she knew she'd probably never teach there again. Garrison knocked softly on the door before entering. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot 3 times while fighting 20 people in a kindergarten classroom," Diana replied with a weak smile. "So, better than expected." "The intelligence Victor left," Garrison said, pulling up a chair. "It was a complete breakdown of an international trafficking network. Weapons, people, information. The kind of operation that could destabilize entire regions. He'd been gathering evidence for years, probably planning to expose it all before his revenge got the better of him." Diana nodded, not surprised. Victor had always been complicated, driven by causes that made sense to him, even when they made no sense to anyone else. "And my students?" "Safe. The school's closed for the rest of the week while they repair the damage, but Principal Bradford has been calling every hour asking when you'll be back."
Diana laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at her stitches. "I don't think I can go back to being just a kindergarten teacher after this." "Maybe not," Garrison agreed. "But maybe that's not what those kids need anyway." 3 weeks later, Diana stood in front of a new classroom in a new school, looking out at 25 6-year-olds who had no idea that their teacher had once been one of the most dangerous people in the world. The official story was that Miss Diana had been injured in an accident at her old school, and that she was excited to start fresh with new students in a new place. The truth was more complicated. Diana Holloway, kindergarten teacher, had died in that gymnasium alongside Viktor Petrov. What emerged was something new. Someone who understood that protection and education were just different forms of the same calling. Someone who could teach children about butterflies and metamorphosis with the absolute certainty that came from having lived through the most profound transformation of all. On her desk sat a new butterfly garden, this one larger and more elaborate than the last. The children were fascinated by the chrysalises, asking endless questions about how something could completely change from one thing into something entirely different. "It's like magic," said a little girl named Hope, pressing her face against the glass. "Not magic," Diana replied, gently adjusting the container to catch the morning light. "It's just proof that sometimes, when everything seems impossible, that's exactly when the most beautiful transformations happen." She didn't tell them that she still carried a concealed weapon, or that she'd installed security systems that would make a military base envious, or that she slept with one eye open because Phoenix never truly died. She just learned to hide her wings. The children didn't need to know that their teacher had once been a ghost who haunted the nightmares of international criminals.
They just needed to know that Miss Diana would keep them safe, would teach them about growth and change and the infinite possibility that lived inside every caterpillar brave enough to trust the darkness of the chrysalis. As her students settled in for story time, Diana opened a book about a very hungry caterpillar and began to read, her voice warm and steady with no trace of the steel that lay beneath. Outside the window, she could see parents dropping off their children, trusting her with the most precious things in their world. That trust was the most dangerous weapon she'd ever carried, and the most sacred responsibility she'd ever accepted. Some butterflies, Diana had learned, were meant to be guardians, and some guardians were meant to look exactly like kindergarten teachers who loved children more than life itself. The transformation was complete. Phoenix had finally learned to soar. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.